Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Easy English Spark. I'm thrilled you're here because today we kick off a brand new storytelling series that's perfect for boosting your English listening and speaking skills. Over the next 10 episodes, from Chapter 1, A Stormy Arrival, all the way to Chapter 10, Charting New Waters. You'll follow Mia's inspiring journey while practicing real-life English in every scene. Grab your headphones, settle in, and let's spark your fluency. Together. Chapter 1, A Stormy Arrival. The night the baby came into my life began with thunder that rattled the loose panes of my corner shop and sent ripples across the black surface of Ivy Lake. I had just finished sliding the bolt across the door. Rain was already needling sideways through the street lamps when Emma burst in, her shawl soaked and flapping like a torn sail. "Lucas, there's a child at the station," she gasped, water streaming from her hair onto the floorboards. Alone. The word alone knifed through the hush of the shop. I snatched my coat from the peg and we raced toward the tracks, shoes slapping puddles that smelled of cold iron and lightning-split cedar. The wind shoved us sideways, yet the station's solitary lamp burned bravely through the downpour, a pale eye guiding us. Beneath that lamp, on a wooden bench slick with rain, lay a wicker basket. Someone had tucked a frayed pastel quilt around the bundle, but the fabric was already drenched. A tiny fist punched upward, and then a wail, thin, desperate, determined, rose into the storm. I remember how Emma knelt first, her hands trembling. She peeled back the edge of the quilt as though unwrapping the most fragile glass. Inside was a baby girl, cheeks flushed from the cold, rain droplets clinging to lashes that fluttered like wet moth wings. A paper tag was pinned to the blanket. Her name is Mia. Care for her. No surname, no explanation, only that plea. Emma gathered Mia against her chest. The child fit so neatly there it felt almost preordained, as if Emma's arms had been waiting for that wait. The baby's crying slowed to hiccups. Her fingers curled around the drawstring of Emma's bedraggled apron. I found myself holding my breath, not wanting to disturb the fragile truce between stranger and child. A freight train roared past, spraying grit and wind. When its red lanterns vanished into the trees, the station was deserted again. No frantic parent came running from the shadows. No carriage door slammed. Only rain, the taste of copper in the air, and this new heartbeat nestled under Emma's shawl. "We can't leave her here," Emma said, voice steady now, but her eyes searched mine, asking 1,000 questions neither of us could answer. "We won't," I promised. though I felt the weight of that promise settle on my shoulders like the downpour itself. Carrying Mia through town, I noticed things I had never truly seen. How water pooled in the cracks of the cobblestones like liquid silver. How wind rattled the loose shutters of the tailor's shop. How every house turned its lights inward, protecting whatever or whomever waited inside. At our lakeside cottage, the storm slammed into the cedar shingles with renewed fury. Still, the moment we stepped over the threshold, the world seemed to draw a breath and grow quieter, as though acknowledging that Mia had found harbor. We dried. Her with the softest towel, one Emma's mother had embroidered decades earlier. Emma fed her warm goat's milk from a porcelain cup, tilting the rim carefully so only a shallow stream touched the baby's lips. Mia's eyes, storm gray reflecting every candle we lit in the kitchen, fluttered open and closed, like cautious shutters testing unfamiliar light. When she was finally full, she burrowed beneath the woolen throw on our old rocking chair and exhaled a sigh so content it sounded like the first note of a lullaby. While Emma rocked her, I stoked the stove higher than I ever dared on spring nights. Flames bloomed, drying the rain in our clothes and painting the walls gold. Above the mantel hung the map of Ivy Lake where I charted each season's sailing routes. I caught myself imagining tiny footprints scampering along those pencil-thin lines, seashells collected in apron pockets, laughter skipping across the water like flat stones. The thought felt dangerous. Hope often is, but I let it bloom anyway. Thunder rolled again, farther off this time, retreating over the distant pines. I poured hot tea, my hands finally steady, and handed a cup to Emma. She didn't drink, only watched me asleep, her expression equal parts wonder and fierce resolve. Something unspoken passed between us then, an agreement that whatever story lay behind that paper tag would never outweigh the story we were about to write. I trimmed the wick of the oil lamp and whispered, "Welcome home, little sailor," because home is not always where a life begins. Sometimes it is the harbor that appears in the darkest weather, offering refuge precisely when the sky seems intent on tearing itself apart. Outside, rain kept time on the roof, steady and sure, but inside our cottage, a new rhythm had already begun. A softer beat, the cadence of a tiny heart newly anchored to ours. And with that pulse, the stormy night completed its secret work, forging a family where none had existed just hours before. Chapter 2: Days of Sunshine. Morning light poured across the lake like liquid gold, and with it came a new rhythm to our cottage, one that revolved around the soft babble of a growing child. I woke each dawn to the sound of Mia cooing in her cradle, a melody that beat the rooster's crow by a good half hour. While Emma dressed her in cotton rompers we'd stitched from old flour sacks, I set water to boil and ground coffee beans with deliberate care, savoring the earthy scent that promised another ordinary, extraordinary day. We formed habits as naturally as wildflowers find sunlight. After breakfast, Emma tied a sun-bleached kerchief over her hair and opened the bakery window to let cinnamon-sweet air drift toward town. Mia, now able to sit without wobbling, watched from her high chair, cheeks dotted with flour like mischievous constellations. Each time Emma rolled dough, Mia slapped the table in delighted imitation, sending specks of white drifting through sunbeams. I can still hear Emma's laugh, bright as wind chimes, every time a dimpled hand tried, and ever so often succeeded, to swipe dough for a secret taste. By mid-morning, I carried Mia to the dock to check my fleet of model sailboats. She loved the workshop's cedar scent and the tiny brass bells I fastened to every mast. Whenever sunlight touched the bells, they scattered sparks across her dark irises. I'd set a toy boat afloat just beyond the reeds, then point out how a whisper of wind could shift its course. "See, little sailor," I'd say, "even small breaths move great waters." It became our lesson in hope, though I admit the lesson was as much for me. Afternoons belonged to adventure. If clouds drifted overhead, we picnicked under the willow that leaned over the bank, its trailing branches forming a green cathedral. Emma packed oat biscuits and jars of apple preserves. We spread a quilt, mended so often it resembled a patchwork atlas, and let Mia crawl across its countries. She discovered the world through textures, soft moss, cool pebbles, and the silky feathers of the herons that strolled brazenly near the shoreline. Once, she giggled when a dragonfly landed on her sleeve, wings humming like a tiny engine. That laugh, pure, bubbling, impossible to bottle, lingered in the trees long after the insect vanished. On particularly bright days, townsfolk ambled down the lane drawn by the promise of Emma's pastries. Mrs. Aldridge, the retired schoolmistress, always arrived with a basket of lemons for the baby's future lemonade stand, she said. The twins from the grain mill presented Mia with daisy chains, their rough hands oddly gentle as they crowned her like a woodland queen. Even old Mr. Duncan, who seldom smiled, whittled a slender flute and delivered it without ceremony, muttering, "A house with music is never empty." In truth, the entire village seemed determined to fill Mia's life with gifts, sun-streaked afternoons, sweet rolls, and stories told in rocking chairs at twilight. We charted her growth in chalk marks on the pantry doorframe. Each lilac season, Emma insisted we add a flourish, a doodle of a sail, a swirl of frosting, a tiny sun wearing sunglasses. By Mia's second birthday, the doorframe looked like a carnival mural, and our daughter stood beside it proud and unsteady, clutching the wooden spoon that served as her scepter. Evenings slowed the day's bright current to a gentle eddy. As sunset stitched pink and tangerine ribbons across the water, we gathered on the porch. Emma stroked Mia's hair, thicker now, curling at the ends, while I strummed an old mandolin inherited from my grandfather. Sometimes I fumbled chords, but Mia never seemed to mind. She bounced in Emma's lap, squealing each time a note surprised her. Fireflies lit the yard, sparking wonder in 3 pairs of eyes, and I wondered whether any lantern in the world could rival the soft glow of those living stars. At night, after Emma tucked Mia beneath a quilt smelling faintly of vanilla and lake mist, we lingered by the cradle to watch her dream. She often smiled in her sleep, tiny fleeting grins as if remembering secret jokes shared with the moon. Emma would brush a curl from Mia's brow, whispering the same promise each bedtime. May your tomorrows be as bright as this day. And though the words were for Mia, I felt them sink into me, anchoring hope for all 3 of us. Seasons turned pages. Mia toddled, then walked, her first steps taken on a path of sunlit dust that led from the bakery door to the dock's edge. She clapped as gulls soared overhead. She wept the first time a wave drenched her shoes. She spoke her earliest word, light, while pointing at reflections dancing on the ceiling. Light, the very thing she had carried into our lives. Those days of sunshine were stitched with simple threads, dough rising in wooden bowls, sails catching morning breezes, songs drifting over still water. Yet each thread shimmered as if woven from pure gold, reminding Emma and me that family is not built by grand gestures, but by 1,000 small moments strung bead by bead into a necklace of memory. And so we lived, 3 heartbeats under one humble roof, bathing in sunlight we never took for granted. We did not yet know the storms that adult years might bring. We saw only endless blue sky threaded with gull cries and the laughter of a child who had turned our world, quite simply, into summer. Chapter 3. Whispers of Truth. I still remember the Tuesday afternoon when an ordinary homework sheet became the key that unlocked a silent room in our family story. Mia was 9 that spring, tall enough to reach the top bakery shelf yet young, enough to stick cinnamon stickers on her notebooks. She burst through the cottage door after school, cheeks flushed from the bike ride, waving an assignment like a victory flag. "Papa, look! Miss Reeves gave us a family tree project." Behind her excitement, I sensed the tiny wobble of uncertainty only a parent can hear. The paper trembled at the edge of her grin. Tiny boxes waited to be filled with names, dates, photographs, roots, and branches that told a lineage. Roots Emma and I had never shown her. That night, while I scrubbed mixing bowls and Emma wiped flour from the counter, we traded quiet glances over Mia's bent head. She was at the kitchen table humming, coloring little leaves on each branch of the tree. In the hush between kettle whistles, Emma's eyes asked, "Is it time?" Mine answered, "Yes, it is." We waited until candlelight pooled soft gold on the walls. I brewed chamomile. Emma cut 2 slices of honey loaf, knowing Mia regarded warm bread as an invitation to listen. When the plates were set, I moved the family tree sheet aside and folded my hands. "Mia," I began, heart thudding like oars against a dock. "Every family has a story. Some chapters are written before a child can remember." She blinked, sensing gravity in the room. Her curls framed her face, and I thought of the first night we met her, rainwater glistening on the same dark strands. Emma reached across the table, covering Mia's small palm. "This is one of those chapters." No thunder punctuated our confession. No dramatic wind rattled the shutters. Outside, frogs crooned under moonlit reeds, as if nature decided tenderness suited the moment better than drama. I was grateful. "Mia," I said, voice steady but soft, "there is something beautiful and brave about how you came into our lives. You were not born in this cottage. Someone else brought you into the world, but fate placed you on our path. We chose you, and you chose us back every day after." Her eyebrows knit. "You mean I'm adopted?" The word floated between us like a fragile glass ornament. Emma squeezed Mia's hand, eyes bright but untearful. "Yes, sweetheart. You were the greatest gift we ever found." Silence followed, long enough for the kettle to hiss, long enough for my pulse to count every heartbeat in the room. Then Mia lifted her gaze, searching our faces for cracks in the love she had always known. Finding none, she exhaled a breath I did not realize she had been holding. "So, my first parents, do you know them?" "We know a little," Emma replied. "Their names were written on a note. They loved you in their way, but they could not keep you safe. So they left you where you could be found." Mia traced a finger around the rim of her mug. Did they ever come back? Not yet, I said honestly. But if someday they do, we will face that day together. I expected tears or anger, even a cry of confusion. Instead, Mia's shoulders eased. She studied the flicker of the candle, as if comparing its flame to something inside her, something intact. Finally, she spoke, voice no louder than the wings of a night moth. I thought maybe something was different. At school, some kids look like tiny copies of their parents. I don't look like either of you. She tilted her head. But I feel like you. A swell of relief warmed my ribs. Emma let out a quiet laugh, half sob, half song. Feelings tell a truer story than faces ever could. Mia picked up the family tree sheet again. Will this be wrong now? Not at all, I said. We can grow a new kind of tree. One with roots in love instead of blood. She considered that, then reached for a colored pencil. The trunk she drew was thicker than before, bark shaded with deep browns and golden streaks. At its base, she printed Emma's name, then mine, in curling letters. From those two anchors, she sketched a single strong branch bearing her own name, wrapped in a banner of green. Below it, she wrote one word in tiny capitals. Chosen. Later, after Mia fell asleep clutching her half-finished drawing, Emma and I stood in the hallway outside her room, hearts still humming. The mantel clock ticked louder than usual. Every second sounded like permission to breathe again. I was afraid, Emma whispered, that telling her would change everything. It did, I replied, pulling her into an embrace. It changed fear into truth. In the dim glow of the hall lamp, we saw Mia's silhouette rise and fall under her quilt. On the wall behind her bed hung the small brass compass I'd given her on her second birthday, a token to remind her that tiny shifts in direction can take a boat to wondrous shores. Tonight that compass seemed to gleam brighter, as if recognizing the course correction of honesty. Before we turned in, Emma slipped back into Mia's room. She knelt by the desk where the family tree lay beside scraps of colored paper. With careful hands, she added 2 more paper leaves, blank for now, branching from Mia's name. She did not label them. She simply left them open, like doors, in case one day Mia wanted to write the names of the people who had given her life, but not a home. The next morning, sunlight found its way through lace curtains, scattering bright maps across the floor. Mia bounded into the kitchen, family tree sheet waving once more. She had written a new title at the top, Ways the Heart Can Grow. "I need pictures," she announced. "One of you kneading bread, one of Papa carving boats, and one of me catching my first fish." "You caught it upside down," I reminded her. She grinned. "Even better for the story." As we gathered old photographs, cut shapes, and glued memories, I realized that truth had not diminished our family. It had widened it. The quiet chapter we once guarded like a secret was now part of Mia's own voice, a whisper turned clear song. In its harmony, our cottage felt larger, the lake brighter, the future wide as the sky. And so the day after honesty dawned golden and ordinary, the best combination I could imagine. Mia laughed. The scent of cinnamon rolled through open windows, and somewhere a tiny brass bell chimed, noting that our sails had caught a new wind, gentle, steady, and free. Chapter 4: Roots and Wings. I sometimes measure time by the length of shadows on Ivy Lake. When Mia turned 12, those shadows began to stretch, just as she did, suddenly and all at once, like a sapling discovering it has permission to reach higher than the hedgerow. One morning, I watched her stride down the lane for her first day of secondary school, backpack bouncing, braid swaying. The sun had barely cleared the fog. Dew still clung to spiderwebs along the fence rails. Yet, Mia walked as though the path itself unfurled beneath her boots, clearing the way for a destiny only she could see. With adolescence came 1,000 small firsts, each one a thread tying her more firmly to the world while loosening her need to cling to us. Emma and I called those threads roots, though Mia preferred anchors because she liked the nautical notion that an anchor could lift as easily as it could hold. Whatever the word, the effect was the same. Mia was grounding herself in places we could no longer chart for her. At school, she discovered choir, and through choir, the power of her own voice. On Saturday mornings, bakery still fragrant with Dawn's first loaves, she practiced scales beneath the rafters, her soprano ringing clear enough to make the flour bags hum. I once paused midway through kneading to listen. The rising note reminded me of a swallow launching skyward, fragile, sure, and breathtakingly high. Emma leaned against the door frame, dough-flecked hands pressed to her heart, tears brightening her smile. "Our girl is learning to fly," she whispered, and I understood she meant more than music. But roots, too, were strengthening. Every Thursday, Mia cycled straight from school to Mrs. Aldridge's garden, where she volunteered to weed vegetable beds and read poetry to the retired schoolmistress's aging terrier. She attended town meetings, scribbled action items about litter on the lakeshore, and organized classmates for weekend cleanups. She still helped Emma frost cinnamon buns before sunrise on market days, and still insisted on accompanying me to the docks to sand the hulls of my model sailboats. Yet these tasks were no longer simple chores. They were choices. A daughter, deciding which traditions deserved preserving. Some evenings she spread textbooks over the kitchen table, nibbling on dried orange slices while puzzling through algebra. When numbers refused to behave, she'd toss her pencil aside and stomp down to the pier, calling, "I need wind in my brain." I followed at a distance, pretending to inspect ropes while she paced the planks. She'd gulp lake air, mutter equations to the moonlit ripples, then march back indoors, cheeks flushed, solutions in tow, proof that sometimes clarity hides in the space between inhale and exhale. Emma said those walks were Mia's thinking sails. I preferred to see them as wings unfurling, quiet, private, unstoppable. We marked her 13th birthday with a sunrise outing on the big sailboat I'd saved for special occasions. The lake lay glassy. Mist curled like question marks around the prow. Mia took the helm, knuckles white at first, then loosening as breeze filled the canvas. The boat tilted, water hissed along the hull. I watched her eyes spark with the realization that she could harness unseen forces. Adjust by feeling, not fear, I coached. She grinned, already doing exactly that. Emma recorded the moment. On her old film camera, capturing our daughter silhouetted against the bruised pink dawn, hair whipping, courage alight. That photograph now hangs above the mantel, next to the compass, a portrait of the instant a child reached for the horizon and found it answering back. With growth came questions sharper than any she had asked as a child. One autumn night, homework. Finished and dishes drying, Mia sat between us on the porch swing, knees tucked beneath a blanket. Stars burned holes in the velvet sky. "Do you think my birth parents wonder who I am now?" she asked, voice low. The question fluttered like a moth against a window, gentle yet insistent. Emma answered first, her words soft as falling ash. "I believe wondering is what hearts do when they're apart." I added that wondering is different from belonging. Belonging, I told her, is built daily, plank upon plank, until you can stand on it barefoot without fear of falling. Mia considered this, nodding slowly, then rested her head on my shoulder. Silence carried the conversation farther than language could. By 15, she towered almost eye to eye with me. She learned to drive the bakery's delivery van, coaxing its stubborn clutch into town each pre-dawn Saturday. She saved tips to buy Emma a new oven thermometer and me a magnifier lamp for delicate rigging work. She kept a journal, its pages peppered with sketches of sails and staves of music, but also with lists headed "What I Love," "Coffee Foam Art," "Thunderstorms at Noon," "The Smell of Cedar After Sanding." Reading those lists, with permission, felt like mapping constellations no telescope had charted yet. It was also the year Mia auditioned for the provincial youth choir. On decision day, she paced the cottage, spinning Emma's rolling pin like a baton, pretending nonchalance. When the acceptance letter arrived, tiny envelope, monumental news, she lifted it skyward, then hugged us so fiercely the three of us, nearly toppled like dominoes. That night we celebrated with vanilla brioches and fireworks over the lake, their reflections glitching across water like neon fish. I realized that pride can hurt a little, the way sudden elevation makes lungs ache. With thin air, it is the ache of watching your heart walk around outside your chest, safe and not safe all at once. Of course, growth was not a seamless ascent. There were storms, a missed curfew, a failed physics exam, a cruel rumor whispered in the cafeteria that left her eyes rimmed red. On those nights she retreated to the attic, curling atop old sailcloths. Emma and I waited below like lighthouse keepers, letting her navigate the dark until she chose our beam again. When she emerged, she carried questions about fairness, forgiveness, and identity heavy enough to capsize sturdier vessels. We answered what we could, admitted when we didn't know, and trusted the lake, its tides, its patience, to fill the rest. Slowly she pieced together that wings grow stronger against headwinds, and roots run deepest where storms once stripped the ground bare. The summer she turned 16, Mia stood barefoot on the warm dock planks and told us she wanted to apply for a scholarship to a choral academy in the capital, 2 hours away by train. Emma swallowed hard. I gripped the railing. Yet beneath the pinch of impending absence, pride unfurled like a white sail catching first light. We helped her prepare recordings, rehearsed interview questions, and ironed her modest blue dress the night before auditions. When the acceptance call came, voice crackling through the bakery's landline, Mia clapped a flour dust fingerprint on my cheek, leaving a mark I didn't wipe away for hours. The cottage felt enormous the September day she departed. We waved from the platform, Emma's handkerchief fluttering, my pockets heavy with letters I planned to mail weekly. The train hissed, lurched, and shrank to a silver thread slicing through maples aflame with early autumn. Ivy Lake mirrored, the sky behind us, vast and suddenly quieter. Yet in that hush I sensed not loss, but expansion, as though our home's walls had stretched to follow Mia's journey. like elastic boundaries of love. That evening, Emma and I sat on the porch, cups cooling in our hands. We listened to the wind skate across empty chair slats where Mia once perched to recite Latin verbs or belt warm-ups. Emma touched the compass above the mantel. "Roots," she murmured. "Wings," I answered, feeling both under my ribs. And in the gathering dusk, I understood that giving a child roots had never meant keeping her grounded forever. It meant ensuring that wherever she flew, she could always find her way back to where the water first learned her name. So we waited, not in sorrow, but in readiness, for the flutter of return. Because every leaf knows the path home to its tree, every swallow charts a circle back to straw eaves, and every child who learns the shape of love will someday trace that shape across distant skies, leaving luminous contrails for others to follow. We had taught Mia the lake's language. Now the world would teach her its symphonies. Our task, ever after, would be to keep the hearth bright, the bread warm, and the door unlatched, roots sturdy, wings remembered, until her footsteps echoed. Again down the garden path. Chapter 5. A Mysterious Letter. The late winter sun had barely melted the frost off Ivy Lake when the letter arrived, slipped between seed catalogs and bakery invoices, as though it were nothing more consequential than a grocery flyer. I found it on the post office counter, leaning against the parcel scale like a shy stranger waiting to be claimed. What caught my eye first was the envelope itself. Thick, cream-colored, edged with a faint blue trim that reminded me of stationery from another era. There was no stamp, only a neat fountain pen address in midnight ink. Miss Maye Everly C.O. The Lakeside Cottage, Ivy Lane, Alderhaven. No return address, no postmark. Just those deliberate strokes, each letter curved with the patience of someone who has rehearsed a name over and over before writing it down. Instinct prickled the back of my neck. Mia was away at the capital's choral academy, buried in rehearsals for a spring concert. Mail for her usually came straight to her dormitory. I slipped the envelope beneath my coat, feeling its weight, or rather its curious lack of weight, against my chest, and stepped into the brittle morning air. The lake lay gray and silent, as though holding its breath. Emma stood behind the bakery counter piping honey cream roses onto cupcakes when I pushed through the door. I waited until the last swirl was perfectly placed, because our lives have taught us that some news should not arrive mid-task. Then I set the envelope beside the cooling rack, Her eyes narrowed first in curiosity, then widened in recognition of that blue edging. She wiped her hands on a linen towel and traced one finger along the seam, studying the ink the way a cartographer reads rivers. "Hand-delivered," she murmured. "No stamp. Who would—" "I don't know," I admitted, "but it's addressed to Mia. Should we open it or wait until she's home next month?" Emma hesitated. "We have always defended Mia's privacy with the same fierceness we defend her safety. Yet intuition tugged harder than etiquette. "Whatever is inside," she said, meeting my gaze, "could change how she sees tomorrow. I'd rather be ready than blindsided." So we broke the wax seal, an old-fashioned emblem pressed with what looked like a single feather. Inside lay 2 items: a folded sheet of cream paper matching the envelope and a small photograph, edges frayed as though it had lived many years in a pocket. Emma lifted the photo first. A young couple stood beneath a coastal lighthouse, wind whipping their jackets. The man's smile tilted lopsidedly. The woman's scarf snapped like a pennant behind her. I did not know their faces, but something about the woman's eyes, gray with specks of storm cloud blue, felt unsettlingly familiar. Emma's breath caught. "Lucas," she whispered, tilting the photo so sunlight glinted off its glossy surface. "They're about our age now, only this picture must be 20 years old." I unfolded the letter. The handwriting matched the envelope. Steady, elegant, slightly slanted. Only 3 sentences stared up at us. "We have searched across seasons and seas. If you wish to know the beginning of your song, meet us where the river touches the tide on the first full moon of spring. No expectations, only truth. No names, no phone number, just that poetic rendezvous." A single line of coordinates penciled below marked a riverside village nearly 90 miles west, Saltmarsh Bay, a place I had visited once for a boat show long ago. Emma pressed her palm to her chest. "Lucas, this can't be coincidence. The beginning of your song. That's how Mia describes her birth story in her journal." The phrase vibrated in my ears like a struck bell. I pictured Mia practicing scales on the academy balcony, voice spiraling into dusk, unaware that echoes from her forgotten past were drifting nearer. For 2 days we debated whether to tell her immediately. Spring term was her busiest. Choir competitions, history presentations, the thrill and terror of life beyond the lake. Should we risk tilting her focus with a mystery she never asked for? Yet secrecy felt like building a dam across a river destined to swell. We decided to drive to the capital on Sunday, under the pretense of delivering a fresh batch of Emma's almond croissants. The academy's limestone arches framed winter bare, sycamore trees, their branches scribbling across a pale sky. We found Mia in the practice courtyard, laughing with a cluster of altos. When she spotted us, she sprinted across the flagstones, coat flaring behind like a swallowtail. After hugs and pastry-laden greetings, we found a quiet alcove beneath an ivy-draped colonnade. Emma handed her the envelope. I watched our daughter's expression pass from surprise to puzzlement as she turned it over, tracing her own name as though seeing it for the first time. She broke the seal with a decisive thumb. Reading the letter, she frowned, then read it again, lips silently shaping every word. Finally, she looked up, eyes luminous. Did you open it already? Yes, Emma said gently. We thought it might be important, and we wanted to support you, whatever it means. Mia studied the photograph. They look kind, she said, voice almost inaudible. A breeze stirred, rustling the ivy like whispered encouragement. Do you think these are... We don't know, I answered. But you have the right to choose. Ignore the letter, write back, or meet them. We'll follow your lead. She held the picture at arm's length, as if trying to test its truth against daylight. Where the river touches the tide, she repeated, pupils flicking like compass needles. That's poetic. Then, after a long pause, I need to sing at the regional festival next week. After that, maybe we could go together. Relief mingled with apprehension. A door cracked open onto an unmapped corridor. Together, Emma agreed, squeezing her shoulder. Mia slipped the letter and photograph back into the envelope, then tucked it inside her music folio, sandwiched between Bach motets and jazz arrangements, as if history, too, were just another song awaiting rehearsal. The nights that followed felt suspended, stretched between anticipation and dread. Emma baked more than usual, kneading anxieties into dough until cinnamon swirls filled every shelf. I retightened the rigging on my sailboats twice, though wind conditions hadn't changed. Each task was a placeholder for the question neither of us could answer. What if Mia discovered a love that rivaled ours? What if the past asked more of her than she could give? Meanwhile, Mia phoned every evening after rehearsal. Sometimes she chatted about harmony lines and cafeteria disasters. Other times a pensive hush hung between us like an unsung verse. The mysterious letter had become a lodestar, tugging lightly, insistently. One Thursday, she confessed, I've been dreaming of a lighthouse by the sea. I think it's the one in the photo. In the dream, I'm singing at the top of the stairs, and the wind carries my voice into the lantern room. She laughed, a fragile sound. Do you think memories can hide in dreams? Emma answered, memories. Wishes, warnings. Dreams carry many things. Write them down. Songs grow from dreams. Mia promised she would. The first full moon of spring rose bright as a polished coin, an omen impossible to ignore. We loaded the van with thermoses of coffee and wool blankets and set out before dawn, headlights combing empty roads. Frosted. Fields gave way to tidal marshes where egrets stalked in the silver gloom. Salt Marsh Bay emerged at the river mouth, a huddle of weather-worn cottages and one crumbling cannery. The lighthouse from the photograph, whitewashed tower topped by a red cap, crowned a rocky spit where the river surrendered to the sea. Moonlight bleached the water pearl gray. The tide breathed in and out with the hush of a giant creature sleeping beneath. We parked near the breakwater. Mia stepped onto the shingle, boots crunching shells. She clasped the compass I'd given her years ago, thumb rubbing the brass until it glowed. Emma slipped her arm through mine. The three of us advanced, waves licking our footprints. Halfway. Down the pier, Mia slowed. Two figures waited near the lighthouse door, a man and a woman cloaked in twilight. They did not wave. They only stood, hands entwined, as if afraid that a gesture might startle the fragile geometry of this moment. Mia inhaled shakily. "Whatever happens," she whispered, "thank you for being here." "You are our harbor," Emma replied, "and you are our North Star," I added. We walked the final meters together. From here, dear listener, the chapter does not end with answers. It ends with possibilities. A letter delivered without a stamp led us across counties, across years, across the boundary between certainty and what comes next. I cannot yet tell you what words were spoken on that windswept pier, or how a heart decides which rhythms belong to ancestry and which belong to upbringing. That story belongs to the next turning page. But I can tell you this: the moon witnessed a family, 3 figures and perhaps 2 more, standing where fresh water meets salt, where beginnings meet continuations, where roots dip into wider currents, and wings test new drafts of wind. In the hush before voices found courage, the lighthouse lamp ignited, a silent benediction of gold spilling over stone and sea alike. Some letters arrive sealed with wax. Others arrive sealed with fate. This one carried both. And as the tide rose around our boots, I understood that however the past would re-enter our narrative, We were no longer the same family who opened that envelope beside a tray of honey cream cupcakes. We were something broader, stretched, yes, but not broken, ready to learn what truths sound like when sung in harmony across open water. Chapter 6. Confrontation on the Pier. The night air at Saltmarsh Bay smelled of kelp and cold iron as we followed the creaking planks toward the lighthouse. Moonlight glazed every nailhead, turning the pier into a silver spine that shivered beneath our soles. Waves slapped the pilings in a slow, metronomic rhythm, steady enough to count heartbeats, loud enough to swallow words if they faltered. Mia walked a pace ahead, shoulders squared, the brass compass swinging from her wrist. Like a talisman, Emma and I kept to either side of her, flanking her the way breakwaters guard a harbor mouth. My own pulse hammered, but I forced my breathing to match the sea's inhale-exhale so she would hear calm where I felt only collision. At the lighthouse, Jor, two figures waited exactly where the letter had promised. A man in a charcoal coat and a woman wrapped in a sea-green shawl that fluttered about her like a restless sail. In the dusky glow of the tower lamp, their faces came slowly into focus. Older than the photograph, weather-etched, yet unmistakably the same pair. The man's lopsided smile was absent now. The woman's storm-gray eyes shimmered with something between hope and apology. Mia stopped 3 strides short of them. The distance felt both tiny and immense, a span measured not in feet, but in missing years. The woman spoke first, voice low, almost crushed by her own restraint. "Mia?" My daughter swallowed, chin lifting. "Yes." "I'm Nora," the woman said, pressing a hand to her chest. "And this is Gabriel." She glanced at the man, who nodded, jaw tight. Her voice quavered like a mast in high wind. "We're grateful you came." No one moved. Even the waves seemed to hesitate, as if the sea itself recognized a fragile boundary drawn across that open pier. Mia's reply emerged steady but soft. "Your letter said you wanted to tell me the beginning of my song. I'm here to listen, but I can't promise more than that." The man, Gabriel, exhaled, shoulders slumping as if those measured words released a tension coiled for years. "Thank you," he said. "That is more than we deserve." He reached inside his coat, withdrawing a bundle of papers wrapped in waxed linen. Rather than offering them, he cradled them against his chest. "There's a history, your history, in here. Hospital records, my mother's diary pages, even the ticket stub from the train station where where we let you go. His voice cracked on the last phrase. My hope was to place these in your hands tonight, but only if you wish it. Silence followed, heavy, salt-laden. I felt Emma's fingers brush mine. She didn't take my hand, but the touch steadied me, reminding us both that our role was ballast, not rudder. Mia's gaze flicked to the bundle, then back to Nora. Why now? Why, after all these years, did you decide to look for me? Nora's answer came in fragments, like planks nailed down as she crossed them. Because guilt corrodes. Because every lullaby I sang to the wind felt unfinished without your name. Because the lighthouse keeper here, he was my uncle, died last autumn and left me his journals. In them were entries about a young couple who stood on this pier 18 springs ago, crying as they watched a train disappear inland. She paused, inhaling sharply. Reading that, I realized hiding from the past doesn't spare anyone. It only delays the storm. Mia's shoulders softened, not in forgiveness, but in comprehension. I have questions. Ask them, Gabriel said. All of them. Answering is our burden. Did you ever think about finding me sooner? When I was little? When birthdays passed? Gabriel's eyes glinted. Every year on 17th of May we baked a chocolate cake and brought it here, eating it on the breakwater as the sun set. We told ourselves we were honoring you from a distance. Pathetic comfort, I know. We feared we'd only disrupt your life. He looked at me, then at Emma, acknowledging what we represented. We feared you were already loved in a way we might never match. Emma stepped forward, voice firm yet gentle. Love isn't a contest, Gabriel. It's an ocean big enough for many boats. Nora's lips trembled into a grateful smile. Thank you, she whispered. A gull shrieked overhead. Its cry spiraled into the night, then faded. Somewhere behind us, a buoy bell clanged 3 solemn notes. Mia drew a breath that steamed in the cool air. I'm not here to replace anyone, she said, glancing back at us. Lucas and Emma are my parents. That isn't negotiable. She returned her gaze to the couple. But I am willing to know the people who gave me life. If we go slowly, on my terms. Relief rippled through Nora's posture, as visible as wind across water. She reached into her shawl again and produced a small velvet pouch. May I? She asked, extending it toward Mia. Mia nodded, palms open. Inside the pouch lay a silver pendant shaped like a quaver, the musical note. It caught the lighthouse beam and flashed. On the back, a single word was engraved. First. Nora's voice cracked as she explained, "It belonged to my grandmother, a violinist. We hoped it would be your first keepsake from us, something that honors the music you've chosen." For a heartbeat, Mia couldn't move. Then she closed her fingers around the pendant, thumb tracing the engraving. "Thank you," she murmured, voice husky. Gabriel lifted the bundle of papers. "And this? When you're ready." Mia hesitated. "Not tonight," she decided. "Send them to me in a parcel. I need time to open that story page by page." Gabriel dipped his head. "Whatever you wish." Wind whipped Nora's shawl again, wrapping the two of them briefly together like the closing of a parenthesis. Mia stepped back, and Emma mirrored her movement. Our family's shape reformed instinctively, a triangle pointing homeward. "We should go," Mia said, slipping the pendant into her coat pocket. "The tide's rising." Nora's eyes glistened in the moonlight. "May we write to you?" "Yes," Mia answered, offering a small, careful smile. "Letters first, then maybe tea. One step at a time." Gabriel's shoulders relaxed though permission to hope had just been granted. "Then we'll wait," he said, "as long as it takes." We turned toward the shore. Boots thudded on damp planks. The pier itself seemed to exhale, relieved the tense standoff had curved into cautious truce rather than shattered into grief. Halfway back, I glanced over my shoulder. Nora and Gabriel still stood in the lighthouse's glow, hands clasped, smaller now against the towering beacon but luminous in their stillness. 2 points of light stitched imperfectly into our horizon. Mia walked beside us, expression unreadable. Only when we reached the van did she speak, voice tiny but unbroken. "That was harder than singing solo in front of 1,000 people." Emma kissed the crown of her head. "Courage costs breath," she said. "You spent it well." I opened the passenger door. Mia climbed in, then held up the quaver pendant, letting it swing like a metronome. "Roots," she whispered, thinking aloud. "And wings. And maybe bridges, too." As the engine rumbled to life, a gust rattled the wharf chains and set the lighthouse lens revolving, throwing a corridor of white across the dark water. For the first time that night, I noticed the rhythm of its sweep. Light, pause, darkness, light again, an endless cycle of revelation and uncertainty. Somewhere inside that cadence, I realized, we would all have to learn a new harmony, one that included distant notes yet kept our core melody intact. We drove away following that stripe of reflected moonlight until the pier shrank to a silent line behind us. In my rearview mirror, the lighthouse kept sending its signal, a promise that someone would always be watching the tides, guiding the way home no matter how far any of us wandered. And in the hush of that long drive back to Ivy Lake, the only sound was the faint clink of a silver quaver swinging, a measured beat marking the beginning of a brave, uncharted reprise. Chapter 7. I Need Time. When we left the pier that night, Saltmarsh Bay receded behind us like a half-remembered song, one that ends on a suspended chord, unresolved, begging for silence to finish the cadence. The van's headlights cut a ragged tunnel through the marsh fog, but inside the cab no one spoke. Emma stared out her window, knuckles white around a thermos of cold coffee. Mia sat between us, shoulders bowed, the silver quaver pendant resting on her palm. Every few minutes she closed her fist around it, as if testing whether the weight was memory or dream. At the county line she finally whispered, "I need time." 2 words, quiet as dewfall, yet they filled the van so completely I felt the engine labor under their gravity. Emma reached across the gear shift and brushed a curl from Mia's brow. "Time is yours, sweetheart," she said. "Take all you need." Back at Ivy Lake, dawn had begun to pink the eastern sky, lifting a faint breeze that smelled of thawing earth and distant pine smoke. Normally, Emma and I would have stumbled into the bakery's kitchen, firing the ovens before sunrise. Instead, we locked the door and taped a handwritten note to the window. "Closed today. Family matters." The townsfolk would understand. Even sourdough can wait its turn against the urgencies of the heart. Mia retreated to her attic bedroom, once the sailcloth storage loft. From below we heard drawers sliding, the soft thump of her trunk lid closing, the muffled click of her window latch. Then nothing. No footsteps, no music, no questions. Silence flooded the cottage like a high tide, lapping under doorways, seeping into teacups left untouched. Emma brewed chamomile anyway, and set a cup on the bottom step of the attic ladder, a small, steaming peace offering. She left a note beside it. "Whenever you're ready. No sooner, no later." Hours passed. The tea cooled. The note remained unbeaten by footsteps. I tried to fill the hush by sanding a cedar hull in the workshop, but every scrape of paper dragged guilt across my nerves. At midday, I abandoned the boat and wandered the lake path. Mallards cut V's across. The water. Reeds hissed secrets to the wind. The world kept moving, indifferent to the human storm brewing under our roof. That evening Mia descended, hair pulled into a loose braid, eyes rimmed red but steady. She carried a small canvas satchel and spoke softly. "I'm going to Emerald Rock for a while." Emerald Rock was a retreat house run by Sister Henrietta, an eccentric nun who believed silence was the most eloquent form of prayer. Nestled in the foothills, the place offered stone cottages, vegetable plots, and 3 unbreakable rules: no clocks, no mirrors, no speaking after sundown. Mia had volunteered there every summer since she was 14, weeding strawberries and tuning the chapel piano. She trusted its hush the way sailors trust the North Star. Emma started to protest. Midterm exams, scholarship deadlines, worry. But Mia raised a hand. Letters can wait. School granted compassionate leave. Sister Henrietta already said yes. "How long?" I asked, forcing calm. Mia shrugged. "Until my head sounds less like 2 choirs singing different keys." Her voice quavered. "I don't want to break something precious by rushing." Emma looked at me. I read the plea in her eyes. Don't tether her. So I fetched the heavy wool cloak, the one that once belonged to my mother, and draped it over Mia's shoulders. "Keep warm," I said, "and keep the compass." She flattened the brass lid against her heart. "Always." The next morning we watched her board the regional bus, satchel on her lap, pendant flashing as she waved. The diesel cough faded. Around the bend, taking our daughter toward solitude. Emma's hand slipped into mine. We stood on the empty road long after the taillights vanished. In that hush, grief felt oddly similar to pride. Both were proof she was charting her own course. Days without Mia stretched into strange, elastic hours. Emma reopened the bakery but halved production. Fewer pastries, longer pauses. Customers noticed the stillness, but offered quiet support, leaving tip jar notes that read, "Thinking of you 3 and love rises like bread. Give it time." I mended dock boards, varnished model hulls, anything to keep hands busy while mine drifted. Every evening, as the sun slid behind Sentinel Ridge, Emma lit a candle in the kitchen window. She called it a lighthouse flame in reverse. Guidance not for ships outside, but for the one soul who might glance homeward from a hill chapel and feel less adrift. Letters arrived from Sister Henrietta every few days. Brief, typewritten updates. Mia tends the herb garden. Her silence is thoughtful. She plays the chapel piano at dawn. The notes are both question and balm. She walks the labyrinth daily, leaving stones at its center. I do not ask what burdens they symbolize. Reading these missives, Emma pressed a hand to her chest, sensing every heartbeat her daughter spent in quiet reckoning. One damp afternoon, the postman brought another envelope. Cream paper, blue edging, the same midnight ink. This time, Lucas and Emma Everly appeared beneath Mia's name. Inside was a single sheet from Nora and Gabriel. We honor Mia's request for distance. We will write again when she is ready. Meanwhile, please accept our gratitude for raising a person of such grace. Enclosed, a donation to Ivy Lake Choir Foundation in her name. A bank draft accompanied the note, sizable enough to fund music scholarships for years. Emma set the draft aside and traced the handwriting. Generosity doesn't erase absence, she murmured, but it tunes the silence a little sweeter. I nodded, unsure whether to feel relief, suspicion, or something in between. The letter joined a growing stack on the mantel, unanswered per Mia's instructions. No replies until I return. She needed a one-way flow of communication. Voices, entering her space like ripples without expecting echo. March melted into April. Snow gave way to crocus shoots. Chickadees stitched morning air with bright syllables. At the bakery window, Emma and I sometimes caught our reflections. Two faces, older, perhaps wiser, knit together by patience. On the first warm Saturday, I found Emma on the dock, legs dangling above green water. She clutched Mia's childhood life vest, fingertips stroking the faded patches where we had stitched new fabric over tears. Without looking up, she asked, "Did we do right letting her go?" "Roots and wings, remember?" I answered, dropping beside her. Roots hold, wings roam. Time is the sky in between. She leaned her head on my shoulder, tears slipping silent as minnows. We sat until twilight, when frogs launched the evening chorus and the lighthouse candle glowed behind cottage. Glass. Mia returned on the 15th of May, one day before her 18th birthday. The bus door hissed open in a swirl of dust and lilac scent. She stepped down wearing Sister Henrietta's woven satchel and a fresh calm I had never seen. A lake at dawn, mirror still but deep. Emma rushed forward, but Mia set her palms on her. Mother's shoulders first, meeting her eyes. "I'm all right," she promised. Only then did she allow the hug, long and breathless. I folded them both into my arms, feeling the last shards of winter melt for good. That evening we sat around the kitchen table, candle between us, tea steaming. Mia produced a thin notebook, cloth-bound, corners frayed. "This is my ledger of time," she said. "Pages of questions, a few answers." She passed it to us. Inside, we found sketches of labyrinth stones, excerpts from psalms, lines of musical notation with lyrics scrawled in the margins. Silence is no exile, it is rehearsal for dawn. Roots drink darkness, wings sip light. Who am I? A chord struck between giver and receiver of breath. Emma's tears blurred the ink. I felt as if I were holding not a notebook, but a dove learning first flight. Finally, Mia spoke the words we had waited to hear. I'm ready for letters now. One at a time, slow, like turning pages on old parchment. I don't know where this will lead, but I know where it must start. Here, with the two of you beside me. She placed the quaver pendant on the table. Moonlight caught its curve. Music needs rests, she said softly. I took mine. The melody can move again. Emma covered the pendant with her hand, then covered Mia's hand with hers. I laid my own atop both, a small tower of resolve. Outside, the first fireflies of spring rose from the reeds, blinking in tentative rhythm, as if testing a symphony against the dusk. I realized then that time had done what time always does when, given permission, it had refined intention, sharpened desire, and paved a slender bridge between uncertainty and action. Mia hadn't run from her storm. She had waited for the wind to teach her its name. Now, by speaking, I'm ready, she invited us to lift anchor and sail again. Together, slowly, deliberately, into waters both familiar and uncharted. And so Chapter 7 closed not with thunder, but with 3 hands resting on a kitchen table, hearts sinking to a tempo reinvented by patience, love, and the space between notes where courage silently grows. Chapter 8. Meeting by the Riverside Café. Morning sunlight spilled across Ivy Lake like pale silk the day Mia chose for her first real conversation with Nora and Gabriel. She planned the location herself, a modest stucco cafe on the Willow River, 40 miles upriver from Saltmarsh Bay, precisely halfway between our cottage and her birth parents' seaside town. Neutral ground, she called it, a bridge that belongs to no one. Emma baked a tin of lemon lavender scones at dawn. Something to share if words hesitate, she said, then packed them in waxed paper while I polished the brass compass, setting its arrow due north as a quiet blessing. We left mid-morning, following the river road until maples arched overhead and the windshield filled with green-gold flickers of sunlight. The cafe came into view as a white splash against the waterline, its terrace framed by weeping willows that trailed their fingertips in the current. Tables of sun-bleached teak dotted the flagstone patio, A striped awning fluttered in a breeze scented with river mint and engine oil from moored fishing skiffs. It was the kind of place travelers forget to photograph, but remember years later because of the way the air tasted of iced coffee and possibility. Mia stepped from the van, smoothing the linen dress she'd borrowed from Emma. Sage green, buttons, carved from pearl. The quaver pendant rested just below her collarbone. It caught a shard of sunlight and flung it riverward like a skipped stone. She inhaled deeply, then exhaled through pursed lips, as if tuning an invisible pitch pipe. "You know where we'll be," Emma said, gesturing toward 2 wicker chairs beneath a sycamore 10 paces away. Close enough for Mia to signal, far enough for privacy. Mia squeezed our hands in turn, one heartbeat, then the next, and walked toward the terrace entrance. For an instant, the breeze tugged her braid over one shoulder. Behind that loose curtain of hair, I glimpsed the courage etched across her profile before she squared it toward the door. Inside, cedar-paneled walls glowed amber in the late morning light. A copper espresso machine hissed gently, and the smell of ground chicory hung like warm smoke. Nora and Gabriel rose from a corner table as Mia approached. They looked less like strangers now, maybe because the hush of anticipation had been replaced by the hush of presence. Nora's sea-gray eyes shimmered. Gabriel's fingers worried a paper napkin until it resembled a gull's broken wing. "Hello, Mia," Nora whispered. Mia's lips curved into a small, steady smile. "Hello?" She sat, folding her hands around the cup the barista set before. Her steam rose in delicate spirals, mirroring the tremor in her breath. She steadied it by tracing the rim with one fingertip. Gabriel cleared his throat. "We weren't sure what you liked, so we asked for peppermint tea, something soothing. If it's wrong, we can change it." Peppermint had been Mia's favorite after-rehearsal drink since age 12. The coincidence, or intuition, softened her shoulders. "It's perfect," she said, and tasted it, letting the mint cool her tongue. Silence settled, thick but not yet heavy. Outside, paired oars clacked against a rental rowboat. Water slapped hulls in lazy applause. Mia broke the quiet first. "I brought something." From her satchel, she produced the linen-wrapped tin. "Scones, lemon lavender, my mum's recipe." She used mum without thinking. The word hung between them like a small bell. Nora accepted the tin, untying the twine with trembling fingers. "They're beautiful." She inhaled the citrusy bloom. My grandmother used lavender on everything from cakes to cough syrup." A shy laugh escaped. Gabriel thinks it tastes like soap, but I adore it. Mia's smile widened a millimeter. Then I chose well. They shared the first bites tentatively, small half-moons disappearing into orchestrated nods of approval. Crumbs dotted napkins like pale confetti. Conversation began, not with grand revelations, but with flavors. Nora's childhood orchard, Mia's experiments with orange zest, Gabriel's confession that he burned every batch of muffins he'd ever attempted. The rhythm of ordinary life smoothed the sharper edges. After the second scone, Mia reached for her pendant, rolling the quaver between thumb and forefinger. "This was a generous gift," she said. "Thank you." Nora's eyes shimmered. Music felt like the only thread we could claim in common. "With you? I wasn't always musical," Mia admitted. "I was tone-deaf until 9. Took one stubborn teacher and 2 years of choir boot camp." She laughed softly. "Nothing innate about it." Gabriel's shoulders loosened. Relief at discovering their daughter's talents sprung from discipline, not distant inheritance. "Hard work is a family trait," he offered. Mia considered that, then nodded. "Maybe that's where I get it," she said, the first outward acknowledgement of shared lineage. The cafe's ceiling fan whirred, scattering the moment like petals. It landed delicately, intact. After pastries, they turned to deeper roots. Nora unfolded a thin leather notebook, pages yellowed, margins harbored in looping pen. "My mother's diary," she explained. "The months before you were born." She slid it across the table, but did not release her hold. "I'm ready to let you read it, just not in one gulp. A little at a time?" Mia met her gaze. "I'd like that." She placed her fingers atop the notebook, neither pulling it toward her nor pushing it away. A promise of future chapters, not theft of present calm. Gabriel produced a small photograph wrapped in tissue. "This is your great-grandfather Jonah Riggs, lighthouse keeper at Saltmarsh, circa 1954. He played fiddle in the bunkhouse after storms." He smiled, half embarrassed. "Thought you might appreciate another musical ancestor to blame." Mia studied the black and white image, a wiry man balancing a violin on one knee, grin as wide as the horizon behind him. "He looks mischievous," she said. "He was," Nora replied. "Skipped school at 13 to work on a steamship. Lied about his age." Mia chuckled. Rebellion must also be genetic. They traded stories then, safe ones at first, about favorite seaside festivals, about Emma's caramel rolls and the Ivy Lake Winter Carnival where Mia once sang atop a snow-sculpted stage. Laughter rose gently, surprising even them. Each anecdote stretched a new plank across the distance until conversation took on the tone of acquaintanceship rather than interrogation. Midway through a second pot of tea, Mia's shoulders stiffened. She glanced toward the patio where Emma and I waited, mugs in hand, pretending to study a map of kayaking routes pinned near the host stand. "Would it be all right?" she asked Nora and Gabriel, "if my parents joined us for a few minutes?" Nora blotted the corner of her eye. "More than all right," Mia waved us over. As I approached, I saw her lay 3 fingers against her throat, the silent signal she used before every choir entrance. "I'm nervous, but ready," I answered with our old stage whisper. "Breathe on 4. 4 steps. Then we reached the I table. Introductions felt oddly ceremonial, though we had faced each other on the pier weeks earlier. Gabriel stood to shake my hand. His grip was firm, work-hardened. Nora clasped Emma's palms between hers as though returning something precious. Words overlapped. "Thank you." "No, thank you." "We're grateful." Each side uncertain. Which gratitude weighed more? The barista delivered fresh cups. Conversation resumed in a knot of 4 parents and 1 poised young woman who, to her credit, directed the ensemble like a conductor. A nod here, a redirect there, keeping harmonies. Balanced, Emma offered a pocketful of bakery anecdotes. Nothing proprietary, just enough flour dust charm to ground the moment. I recounted Mia's first sailing lesson, deliberately humorous. Nora responded with tales of her marine biology students tagging sturgeon upriver. Gabriel described rebuilding the lighthouse railings after a nor'easter. We were, in effect, exchanging currencies of pride. Eventually, Emma placed the compass on the table, its lid open so the needle spun lazily with each passing truck outside. "He gave that to Mia when she turned 2, she told Nora and Gabriel. "When she's sure of her course, it steadies. When she's not, it twirls like a dervish." It twirled now, slow but continual. Nora watched, mesmerized. "May I?" Mia nodded, and Nora steadied the case. The needle quivered before aligning northwest, the river's slow bend toward open sea. A hush settled. Perhaps each of us felt the metaphor tighten around the moment. Direction shared, not dictated. Hours slipped by. The sun angled west, gilding willow leaves and igniting ripples into quicksilver. Customers rotated through tables. Still we lingered, bound by an invisible clause. Remain until the next question surfaces. Leave before exhaustion curdles tenderness. Mia sensed the tipping point first. She closed Jonah Riggs's photograph inside its tissue, slid the diary back toward Nora, and laid her palms flat, a conductor's silent cutoff. "I'm full for today," she said, gentle but definite. "Could we meet again in a few weeks? Perhaps at the Lighthouse Gardens? We could tend Jonah's roses together." Nora's breath caught. "Yes," she answered. "We can bring root cuttings for your lake cottage if you like," Gabriel added. "And maybe I can test pilot a muffin recipe that doesn't char." Laughter circled the table one last time. Chairs scraped softly as we stood. No one reached for hugs, but there were handshakes that lingered, fingertips squeezing just enough to say not goodbye, until next time. Gabriel tucked a note into Mia's satchel, dates of the spring tide schedule, scribbled in tidy block letters. "In case you want to time the roses with full bloom," he explained. Outside, the river had darkened to sapphire. Rowan trees along the far bank leaned across their reflections, curious to see which parts of themselves belonged to water, which to sky. Mia walked ahead with Emma, heads close, pendants glinting twin sparks. I fell in beside Gabriel for a handful of steps. He glanced at the compass in Mia's hand and whispered, "You gave her true north." I shook my head. "We only taught her how to read it." Behind us, Nora touched the cafe doorframe as she passed, as if anchoring the memory to wood. I realized she might relive this afternoon for years, the taste of lavender scone, the hush before Mia's first real smile, the scrape of chairs. I would too. At the parking lot, our paths parted. Two cars angling opposite directions down the same ribbon of road. Mia watched theirs disappear behind roadside alder, then turned the compass lid shut. The device fell still in her palm. "How does it feel?" Emma asked. Mia considered the closed compass, the river, the quiet echo of new names in her ear. "Like, a bridge doesn't need to know which shore owns it," she said. "Only that it carries weight without breaking." We drove home in comfortable silence, windows cracked so wind could braid our thoughts. In the mirror, I saw Mia studying the horizon, not searching, simply noticing, as though the landscape had acquired an extra dimension of color. The quaver pendant tapped a faint rhythm against her sternum, a promise of music yet unscored, and I knew, even before her whisper reached the front seat, that she had mapped another verse of her own song. "One meeting down," she said, voice a lullaby of relief. "Many more, on my tempo." The river kept pace beside us, curving toward Ivy Lake, carrying sunlight and silt and the fragile architecture of beginnings. Somewhere upstream, roses awaited transplant. Somewhere downstream, A lighthouse dreamed of echoing footsteps. Between those two coordinates drove a family of 3, with room now for the gentle gravity of 2 more, guided by a compass that finally rested. Chapter 9. A Father's Lesson. I first realized Mia was wrestling with something unspoken on a cool June evening, 3 days after our meeting at the Riverside Café. The air smelled of cut hay and distant thunderstorms, but our kitchen was hushed. Too hushed for a house that normally rattled with spoon-on mixing bowl percussion and stray rehearsal scales. Mia sat at the window seat studying the dusky surface of Ivy Lake. Her elbows pressed indentations into the quilt, and the quaver pendant lay face down on her notepad like a punctuation mark she hadn't decided how to read. Pages of Jonah Riggs's diary, photocopied by Nora, were spread across the table in uneven piles. Fragments of lighthouse maintenance logs, fiddle tunes written in clumsy sol-fa, half-sketched maps of tidal eddies. She barely noticed when Emma slid a plate of blackberry cobbler beside her. I watched from the doorway, wiping flour from my forearms, weighing whether to speak or let the silence earn its keep. Fathers quickly learn that timing a conversation with an adolescent daughter is like trimming a sail in shifting wind. Pull. Too soon and the canvas snaps. Wait too long and you drift off course. At last, Mia sighed, closing the diary sheet she'd been rereading for the 10th time. He wrote about listening for ship horns on foggy nights, she muttered. Said, they sounded like questions made of iron. She looked up, eyes clouded. Dad, do you ever feel responsible for someone else's questions? I set the dishcloth aside. I feel responsible for helping you row when the questions get heavy, I said, taking the seat opposite her. But you choose which shore to aim for. Mia traced a finger across the penciled stave. Nora and Gabriel have so many stories. Part of me wants every detail right now. Another part feels guilty, like I'm betraying you and Mum by even reading this. Stories aren't disloyal, I answered softly. They're just lanterns. Some burn steady, some flicker. Our job is to decide which roads we light with them. The conversation stalled again. Mia pressed her forehead to the glass, exhaling a foggy oval that erased the lake for a heartbeat. When the view returned, lightning popped low on the horizon, white, thread-stitching 2 hills together. Storm incoming, she whispered. Will the dinghy hold if we sail out tomorrow? She hadn't asked to sail in weeks. I read the subtext. She needed motion, needed the push and pull between rudder and Gus to translate her internal murmur into physics. That was a language we both spoke fluently. It'll hold, I said. Tide turns at 5. We'll go at dawn. Dawn on the water. Gray-pink light seeped over the tree line as we slipped the dinghy from its mooring. A faint drizzle freckled the surface, raising concentric rings that overlapped like the diary's tide diagrams. Mia manned the jib while I handled main and tiller. The lake carried a low chop, wind in the channel, storm pressure falling. We rounded the reed spit, sails snapping, and the cottage shrank to a model on a shelf. Only then did she speak again. I don't know how to balance 2 sets of parents, she said, eyes on the luffing jib. Gabriel wants to send me every document. Nora keeps asking for photos of my childhood. And I keep thinking, what if I disappoint everyone? I let the boom swing across, ducked under. You've trimmed sails before, I reminded her. You know the basics. Angle, tension, give and take. Families similar. Easy to say, she muttered, tightening the sheet. Harder when hearts are the rigging. I nodded toward the western headland. See that pine? The lone sentinel clinging to bare granite. Storms twist it, but it holds because roots grip rock and needles spill just enough wind to survive. It compromises without surrendering. She squinted at the silhouette. Compromise without surrender, she echoed. Is that your lesson? I shook my head. Not yet. The wind shift. At mid-lake, the breeze kicked to a sudden northerly, flipping white caps into our path. Mia's braid whipped her cheek, but she steadied the jib instinctively, letting it backwind a moment before trimming. Feel that? She called over the slap of hull and spray. Wind shift from the storm line, I answered. Time to decide. Run with it or tack into it. She searched the low clouds, calculating. Running's easier but puts us far from home if the squall hits. Tacking's more work but keeps the cottage in sight, I agreed. Mia hesitated, then angled the tiller. We tack. White canvas cracked, water hissed along the gunwale, and we commenced a zigzag approach back toward safe harbor. Each shift demanded coordination. Release, haul, cleat, repeat. After the third tack, Mia's breathing matched the rhythm. In on the release, out on the cleat. Some questions, I knew, could only be answered in sync with body and elements. On the 5th leg, I gestured toward her pendant. Does that quaver ever feel heavy? She nodded, cheeks flushed. Some nights I hear it ticking, like a metronome counting choices I haven't made. Then we need to change its tempo, I said. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a tiny brass key, one she'd never seen. Your grandfather's pocket watch key. The watch is long gone, but the key still turns. Mia's brows arched. Turns what? Anything you decide, I answered. Today, maybe it turns uncertainty into rest. I handed it over. She slipped it on the pendant, chain beside the quaver. 2 symbols, music and time. Balance, reefed canvas, open questions. Rain began in earnest, a steady patter drumming the sailcloth. I signaled to reef the main. Mia scrambled onto the forward thwart to tie the reefing points, knuckles red in the eye. Chill. When she settled back on the leeward seat, hair plastered, she laughed. A startled, triumphant laugh that rose above the wind. I've never reefed in weather before, she gasped. And you did it clean, I replied. See what happens when you meet the storm on purpose? She grew thoughtful. Maybe meeting Nora and Gabriel is like reefing. Reduce the pressure, keep moving. I smiled. Now you're drafting chapter 9 for me. Her eyes softened. Dad, will you tell me your biggest storm? Not the family ones, the Lucas storms. I adjusted the tiller, considered. Very well. I pointed off the starboard bow. I once tried to row solo across this lake in winter. I skimmed the oars, cracked underweight. Halfway across, I realized the risk I'd taken. Fear froze my arms more than the cold. Turning back meant rowing into wind. Pushing on meant black water. I felt foolish, ashamed. Then I heard your toddler voice on the shore, laughing. And I decided fear was lighter when someone waited. That day I learned courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision that someone else's hope outvalues your panic. Mia stared at the water between tacks, absorbing. So if I'm afraid of letting both families down, borrow our hope, I said. Let it tip the scale, making harbor. The storm's edge chased us, but we made the dock in a curtain of silver rain. We hauled the dinghy onto rollers, sails snapping, hull dripping. Thunder rumbled like distant timpani. Inside, the boathouse lantern light blurred in humid air. I poured thermos cocoa while Mia peeled off her gloves, eyes bright from wind and revelation. She set the pendant and key on the bench, studying the 2 metals. I think I understand your lesson now, she said. I waited. You didn't sail me out here to lecture. You let me feel the balance, pressure and release, running and tacking, reefing when the wind demanded humility. Families are the same. Love on one side, boundaries on the other, course corrections in between. I nodded. Anything else? Mia picked up the key. Time isn't a prison, it's a tool. I can turn it slower. Exactly, I said. Letters on your schedule, meetings when sails are trimmed. Compromise without surrender. She slipped the chain back over her head. Then here's my decision, Captain. She straightened. I'll write Nora and Gabriel tonight. 1 letter, 3 pages. The first page, my favorite bakery memory. Second page, my hardest choir rehearsal. Third page, 1 question for each of them. I'll invite them to answer, but only after the concert in July. That gives me 6 weeks, my tempo. Rain hammered the roof. Wind moaned in door cracks. But inside I felt the stillness an experienced sailor recognizes when a knot cinches snug, secure, forgiving. Your port, your starboard, I saluted. Call when you need extra hands. She hugged me then, sudden, fierce, smelling of wet wool and river wind. Thank you for teaching without pushing, she whispered. Thank you for listening without bolting, I teased. Epilogue of the lesson. That night, after cocoa and warm bread, Mia penned her 3-page letter beneath the kitchen lamp. Emma and I sat nearby, mending a sail patch, pretending not to read over her shoulder. When she sealed the envelope, she addressed it simply. Nora and Gabriel. Shared winds, shared tides. Then she laid the compass, pendant, and key in a wooden tray by the door. They stay here tonight, she said. I've got true north inside. Me already. Before bed, she paused on the stairs. Dad, today's chapter needs a title, not just a father's lesson. Something more specific. I thought of the sentinel pine, the reefed sail, the key turning time. How about hold fast, let go? She smiled, broad, unburdened. Perfect, she said. Tomorrow I'll write the chorus. And just like that, the storm outside eased to a whispering drizzle, as though the sky itself agreed the hardest tack had been made, and the voyage, recharted, would find its way. Not by fighting every gust, but by learning exactly when to trust the wind and when to trim the cloth. Chapter 10. Charting New Waters. July arrived wearing a crown of heat lightning and sweet pea perfume, and with it came the final dress rehearsal for Mia's regional choir concert, the waypoint she had chosen as the safe harbor before any new encounters with Nora and Gabriel. 6 weeks had passed since the storm-tossed sail on Ivy Lake, and each day she had lived the father's lesson: hold fast where love anchors, let go where change must flow. The letters echo. True to her resolve, Mia mailed the 3-page letter the very next morning. We watched the red-flagged postbox swallow the envelope like a messenger sparrow vanishing into cedar shade. 3 evenings later, an answering packet arrived. 2 letters, one from Nora, one from Gabriel, tucked inside a sleeve of lighthouse stationery embossed with Jonah Riggs's violin. Mia did not open them immediately. She slid them beneath her metronome and whispered, "Tempo, not impulse." They waited there all month, quiet as low tide, until the night before the concert. Rehearsal week. Our cottage transformed into a boarding house for sheet music and garment bags. Satin choir gowns draped over chair backs. Vocal warm-ups ricocheted off pantry tins. Emma's kitchen became a hydration station of lemon water and honey spoons. Yet even amid the bustle, Mia found moments of anchored stillness. Walking the labyrinth she had chalked behind the bakery, journaling under the sentinel pine, polishing the brass compass before sleep. I noticed the quaver pendant had stopped. Ticking in her imagination, the pocket watch key had balanced its weight. One sultry afternoon she beckoned me to the dock, unfolded the reply letters, and asked that I read alongside her, one paragraph at a time, trading voices like call and response. Nora wrote of transplanting rose cuttings, of humming Mia's favorite motet while kneading bread for a seaside children's shelter. Gabriel's pages were humbler. He mailed a photograph of a half-dozen charcoal-blackened muffins. Exhibit A, still learning, and confessed he kept the diary copies under his pillow, reading by moonlight. Each letter ended the same. No rush. Your course. Your wind. Mia exhaled, and I felt a sail fill. Arrival day. Concert day dawned bright as a burnished trumpet. The performance hall, a renovated opera house on the county capital's riverfront, gleamed, with copper fixtures and floor-to-ceiling windows that caught the water's shimmer. Mia had invited both sets of parents, but she staged it with nautical precision. We would take seats center left, Nora and Gabriel 2 rows back, right aisle. Enough distance that no one felt crowded, yet close enough to share applause like a braided rope. Emma spent the drive rehearsing her own role. No tearful clutching, she muttered, dabbing at the corners of her eyes nonetheless. I tucked a clean handkerchief into her palm. She smiled, defeated before the first note. Inside, velvet curtains swallowed audience rustle. The house lights dimmed, and 60 choristers glided on stage, gowns rippling midnight blue. Mia stood third from the left, compass hidden beneath the bodice, pendant glinting like a star caught in fabric. When the conductor raised his baton, the hush felt electric, storm air waiting for the first drop of rain. They began with Olaguielo's Northern Lights. The opening cluster chord unfurled, icy and luminous. Mia's soprano threaded through the texture, a ribbon of silver thrown across dark fir branches. I glanced back. Nora sat motionless, lips parted. Gabriel's hands gripped the seat ahead. The program ranged from Renaissance polyphony to a foot-tapping African processional. By the time they reached the finale, Eric Whitaker's The Seal Lullaby, I sensed hearts in every row had synchronized. The final cadence hovered, suspended, then melted into silence so fragile no one dared breathe. When applause finally burst, it felt like surf hitting breakwater, unstoppable, joyful. Mia's eyes swept the crowd until she found Emma and me, then tracked to Nora and Gabriel. She did not wave. She simply pressed 2 fingers to her pendant, a semaphore of inclusion. 4 parents answered with mirrored gestures, hands to hearts, palms open, an unspoken vow. Same harbor, many docks, the Riverside promenade. After the concert, we collected ourselves on the promenade overlooking the slow-moving River Alder. Café umbrellas trembled in a breeze scented with magnolia and brass polish. Mia's classmates poured onto the plaza, chattering about encore miscounts and post-show gelato, but she carved a small eddy of space around our group of 5. She faced Nora and Gabriel first. "Thank you for coming," she said, voice steady, despite residual adrenaline. "Your letters answered questions I hadn't formed yet. Now I have better ones." Gabriel's smile was wet at the edges. "Then we've charted at least one coordinate." Emma stepped forward, holding a bakery box tied with indigo ribbon. "Tour provisions," she joked, handing it to Nora. Inside lay 4 salted caramel eclairs and a folded sheet of Emma's handwritten recipe. Nora accepted it like a passport stamp. "Exchange soon," she promised, describing the sea salt fudge she would mail in return. I watched Mia standing between them, shoulders loose, smile unforced, and realized the lesson was evolving. Roots and wings, yes, but also oars. She could row between shores at will, carrying gifts port to port. Roses at the lighthouse. 5 days later, we met at Salt Marsh again, this time under a kinder sky. Nora had dug up 3 cuttings of Jonah Riggs's heirloom climbing rose, roots bundled in damp burlap. We planted one beneath the lighthouse, one along our Ivy Lake dock, and one at Emerald Rock Retreat, symbolically triangulating her story. As we knelt in coarse sand, Gabriel recounted how Jonah believed roses trained on stone kept loneliness from nesting in the cracks. "Beauty is a lighthouse for the heart," he quoted. Mia patted soil around the fragile stem, then tied it to a cedar stake with twine the color of sunrise. "Then let's keep the lamp trimmed," she said. That afternoon, under gull cries and iodine breeze, the two families shared a picnic on the grass. Emma's rye crumb quiche, Nora's sea salt fudge, Gabriel's latest muffins, respectably golden this time. Laughter ping-ponged between blankets. Even the compass at Mia's neck was still. Gabriel produced a fiddle and, with shy bravado, coaxed a passable jig, urging Mia to sing harmony. She obliged, her clear soprano skimming over the drone like a tern over waves. Nora clapped time. I strummed a mandolin borrowed from the Lighthouse Museum, and Emma rolled her eyes good-naturedly at our wobbly trio. Music braided us tighter than conversation ever could. Course bearings. As sunset bled into the tidal flats, Mia asked everyone to walk to the pier's end, the very boards that once bore storm and sorrow. She laid a hand on the railing where wind had scoured grain silver smooth. "This intersection," she said, "was once the site of Confrontation. I'd like to rename it." She drew a piece of chalk from her pocket, left over from her labyrinth, and on a cedar post she wrote, in looping script, "Confluence Point." Confluence, she explained, means separate currents meeting and continuing as one river. It doesn't erase origins. It multiplies them. No one spoke for a long moment. Waves gurgled beneath, accepting the dedication. Then Emma traced the chalk letters with a fingertip. "May all who land here find safe merging." Nora unscrewed the fiddle's rosin, tapped powder into the breeze. "For luck," she said. Gabriel added a boat builder's nail, pressed upright into the post. "For strength." I tightened its head with my pocket pliers. Mia clicked the compass lid against wood. "For direction." Symbols sealed like rivets in a hull. Epilogue. Setting sail. Summer slipped toward harvest. Mia returned to the capital to begin her final academy term, commuting by train on weekends to help with festival loaves or to weed Jonah's roses. Letters now passed fortnightly. Anecdotes, photos, sheet music doodles. Sometimes I saw her circle the labyrinth at dusk, reading a fresh envelope, pausing at each turn to smile or wipe a tear. Tempo. Steady hers. On the equinox, a brown parcel arrived from Nora. Gabriel's first uncharred blueberry scones. Victory! A pressed bloom from the lighthouse rose, and a handwritten chart titled Proposed Voyages. Dates they could attend Mia's senior recital, Ivy Lake Regatta or simply Sunday supper. Mia pinned it above her desk, next to college brochures and choir schedules, mapping future tides. One crisp October dawn, I found her on the dock, journal open, compass in her lap. "Plotting another tack?" I teased. She closed the compass with a snap. "Actually, drafting a new duet, soprano and fiddle." She wiggled her eyebrows. "I'll need backup guitar. Think you can keep up, Dad?" "Trim the sails and watch me," I said. She laughed, the sound skipping across water the way it did when she was a child, yet deeper now, resonant with undertones of empathy, autonomy, and truth. I realized the father's lesson had morphed. Again, teach, then crew, then simply sail alongside. She no longer needed guardrails. She needed companions on her widening sea. As the sun inched over the horizon, gilding every ripple, Mia wrote a single line at the top of her journal page. New. Waters charted, horizons pending. She underlined it once, firmly, and looked at me. "Ready?" For answer, I cast off the bowline, let the dinghy drift clear of the dock. She stepped aboard, sure-footed, no hesitation. The breeze caught the mainsail, canvas, billowed. I glanced back at the cottage, Emma waving from the porch, light glowing in the kitchen window, lily pads bobbing in our wake. Ahead lay 2 shores, then dozens more, stitched by currents we had only begun to name. I set the tiller, but Mia's hand gently overlaid mine, guiding both our grips to a shared midpoint, captaincy by collaboration. Wind filled, bowsprit lifted, and the lake opened like a page that had been stuck together at the edge, now fluttering free. Somewhere behind us, Confluence Point watched, lighthouse lamp turning slow arcs of benediction. Somewhere beyond, roses. Climbed stone, echoing violin notes to passing gulls. And around us the water whispered its oldest reassurance, that every voyage, however uncharted, is simply an invitation to meet oneself in expanding circles of light and tide. We sailed on. Great work today. Every moment you spend practicing brings you closer to mastering your English listening and speaking skills. Remember, progress comes with patience and consistency. If this story inspired you or helped you in your learning journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Easy English Spark channel for more lessons and stories. Keep listening, keep speaking, and keep believing in your growth. I'll see you in the next video. Take care and keep shining.